in my mind, I have like a deep, sultry voice. But when it's played back, it's like this high-pitched, squeaky. And I realized that I'm not as deep as I want. Like the other day, I was at my angel daughter's house, and her best friend was there. And she said, would you like me and my guy to walk you to the parking lot? And I said, no, I'm a thug. I'm good. And she goes, well, saying it like that didn't make me feel like you're very thuggish. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she was like, can you deepen that? She was like, you're like, I'm a thug. And so that's,
it didn't have enough bass in the register?
Yeah,
okay.
She was like, I need a little bit more bass for me to believe you.
Yeah, it's funny because, hey, are we rolling? Are we getting this?
We're live. We're recording.
I feel like I've heard people say they like my voice before, but when I hear it, like I said, I critique it. I once read somewhere that if people don't always know how they look in real life. Mm-hmm, and so you can look at yourself in the mirror, or you can, look at yourself in different angles. But if you saw yourself another you in real life, you might not recognize that person right away, or it might be difficult to look at.
I think so, because there's something called residual memory, right? And there's a residual self-memory. And so sometimes we are trapped in how we looked 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and not realizing, and it's why someone else can come in who hasn't seen you in a long time and say, oh my goodness, you lost a lot of weight. And you're like, have I?
Yeah,
or you
know what
I mean? Yeah. Like you don't see it because you see yourself every day. So
yeah, that's funny. My wife and I, every anniversary, go through our wedding album, and they always recognize my wife, but then they're like, who's this guy? And I'm like, that's me. Like, what do you mean?
I am ashamed at where I was in my health journey when I got married. I can't watch the video.
I know.
Yeah, it's hard to watch the video now.
Yeah, it's
look
painful.
Look at the photos, and it's like, man, what was you pregnant too?
Right.
Not pregnant. That is hilarious.
Yeah. So it was. It's funny because what you mentioned in terms of how we see ourselves, and we really could stretch this out and make it stick to the work we do. But how we see ourselves isn't always how other people see us.
Yes.
And so when people say, I heard your voice. Somebody, when I was presenting at a conference a couple weeks ago, and there was someone who recognized my voice from the podcast. And they came in and they were like, I was going to pass by this, but I heard the voice. And so I'm like, let me go in there. And I'm like, my voice was recognizable to someone I didn't know. Similarly with looks, sometimes you get locked in, like you said, to how you look or how you think you look. Mm-hmm. And then it takes someone to remind you of how beautiful you really are. And so I think that as we come in spaces like this, it's really difficult to let go of that and just talk.
Yep.
But then when I come back and listen to it, I'm right back in that critique mode all over again.
Yeah.
Leading stories, trending topics, changing narratives. You're listening to the Critical Conversations podcast.
Well, welcome to Critical Conversations, y'all. It's great to have you. This is the No Agenda episode part 2. We do a lot of covering heavy topics on this show. And in the first couple of seasons, we've gone through so many things and have hours upon hours of conversation that really stick to your rib. But some of the best conversations I've ever had were conversations that didn't have any agenda. Nothing. You ran into a person, and then before you knew it, you were talking for an hour. And I'm one of those people that'll keep you for an hour and they say, I ain't going to hold you.
But you hold them.
But I held them. So the idea was to try to capture that energy and that essence in a conversation like this. And I kind of think we're already doing that. So welcome. I would like to take the time to get you all the chance to introduce yourselves. Tell the guests who you are. I am fortunate to work with these two individuals, and I've been working with Tina since I got here in 2018. I've been working with Terrance since you came a couple of years ago, and I have been amazed at the work that you all do and the resilience that you show. And it's been a long time coming, but I'm glad to have you here on Critical Conversations. So we are just going to open up the floor, but start off, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do on campus, and tell me about what's happening in your area at this time. And then let's just let the conversation flow. Tina, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, thank you. First of all, I'm happy to be here. So thank you for inviting me. And I'm happy we finally linked up, where I'm able to be here. I am Tina Fakhrid-Deen. I teach in the English department here. I've been here for 11 years this time around. I worked at Oakton 3 years prior, back in the late 90s, early 2000s as the trio director.
Oh, wow. I don't think I knew that.
And what else? In my area as an English person, I think there's a lot going on, especially as it relates to AI and students understanding how to use that resource, that supplement ethically and still trusting their own voices simultaneously and not allowing those supplements to kind of take over what they think and how they think. And so there's been a lot of conversation and navigation because the field is changing when everything that we pick up from our phones to our computers is automatically correcting things for you. Did you mean to say this?
Yeah.
And like it's everywhere and it's useful for many of us for our day-to-day lives. But in an academic setting, especially when you're teaching writing,
right,
you know, that's when it can get tricky. And so part of what I've been trying to do this past year is helping them navigate when it's okay to use these different tools and when it isn't, and why it isn't, and what the implications are if we allow these artificial intelligences to speak and think for us.
Yeah.
You know, and just not just in an English classroom, but in academia, period, on the job, in your personal life, like in life, period. Like you need control and autonomy of your mind. And so, and part of that with the new writers is helping them to trust their own minds and their own voices, especially when K through 12. So much of it is about memorization and doing what the teacher says and parroting back the information that the test wants or that the instructor wants, where at this level we're expecting critical thought. And so it's supporting them in that journey and trusting their own thoughts and developing those thoughts.
Yeah. Trusting their own thoughts, trusting their own voice. Yeah. Excellent.
Terrance Stevenson. I'm the program coordinator for the Emory Williams Academy for Black Men. Honored to do so. It's a unique program that is specifically designed to support African-American male students. And in this culture and climate, I think these types of programs are more necessary than ever. Some recent numbers have come out as it relates to the number of African-American men at HBCUs, and it's horrible. Black men are not going to college, and ones that go, they're challenged to persist. And so we're honored to provide some wraparound supports to help those students achieve their own academic goals. And so what I've learned is that in my over 20 years in higher education, what I've learned is that it's not necessarily the stuff that happens in the classroom that trips up our students. It's the stuff that happens outside the classroom.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's,
Some of the classroom stuff is easy.
Yeah, the classroom stuff is an escape for some of them.
Exactly.
It's, my girlfriend broke up with me and I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. Or I got to work 2 jobs. One of those checks goes to help out and support the house. And the other one goes to help defray the cost of my education. I've got transportation challenges. I read something this morning that talked about one of the reasons why Black men aren't going to college is because there's a belief gap. They don't believe that they can persist and that they can be successful. Yeah. And it reminded me of when I was graduating high school, I had no plan. I had no idea what I was going to do next. My father, was from the generation of get a good job, work that job, retire from that job. Absolutely. And so when it got time for me to, graduate high school, I had no idea what I was going to do. Yeah. And an advisor, one of my former teachers, he was my first Black male teacher in the 8th grade, submitted an application to Morehouse for me on my behalf without my parents even knowing. And I got in. And so there's an acceptance letter that comes to the house. And my parents are like, that's great. We wish you well. We don't know how you can go pay for it because we don't have a pile of money to send you off to school. So I ended up working some, dead end jobs and ended up meeting a young lady who was at the University of Illinois. She invited me down and told me, go take some classes at Parkland College, the community college in town.
I know Parkland.
It's a great place. But I didn't know how to be a student.
Right.
And so
That's real.
I didn't know how to manage my time. I didn't know how to access the resources that were available. And so I ended up flunking out of a community college that's supposed to accept and support everybody.
Yeah.
And the same challenges that I experience are the same challenges that the students that I serve today still experience. And so it wasn't until I connected with someone in advising who pulled me aside and said, hey, son, here's what you need to do. You need to go sit in front of your classes. You need to go talk to your professors during their office hours. You need to make sure you're managing your calendar, manage your time, manage your space, all of those things. And I ended up graduating from there with honors. Transferred from there to EIU, graduated from there with honors. But it wasn't until I learned how to be a student. Yeah. Until I learned how to do that, I was just taking classes and I was burning through financial aid. And so I ended up having to pay for my education out of pocket. And a lot of the students that I serve now are dealing with the exact same thing.
It's such a common story.
So common.
And I have a very similar story, but I'll let you finish.
No. Go ahead.
Like, I feel like, you know, it's such similar narratives, especially being first generation. My parents, too, you know, neither attended college. My mom dropped out in 10th grade, and she was a construction worker and just gotten a job for working for the city.
Good job.
As an electrician, exactly. And it's been, you know, spent so many years trying to get that position. And my father was one of those self-made men, you know, worked a lot of different jobs, had his own trucking company. He was a mechanic and a race car driver. And so my father was like one of those Renaissance men. You know, he DJ'd, he had a small restaurant, you know, the candy shack in the neighborhood, and like just was always picking up different things. And, you know, one thing wouldn't work out, would jump to another thing, but he always wanted to be his own man and have his own thing. And when I graduated early, and shout out to great teachers. And like, I had some fantastic teachers. Donna Poles, who is one of my English teachers, I found out when I got to Oakton as faculty that she just left because she was adjuncting as an English professor. And I didn't know that, but she was my honors English teacher, and she was so hard on me. And I would get my papers back, and it was just all red. And I was like, oh, she gets on my nerves. Like, you can't win with her. But we all know that that's because she saw something in me, and she knew that I had the capacity to do a lot more than I was doing. And she wanted to make sure that she kept pushing me. I was at one of those high schools that didn't have any AP offerings. And so shout out to Sand High School, Bulldogs. Hopefully they do have AP now. But part of that was, I think, there were a lot of students who were low income, a huge immigrant population. And truthfully, the expectation wasn't that we would go on to college and do higher things in terms of education. And so I feel like they met us where they thought we were, which is why I try to never do that. Like, I will never tell a student what they're capable of based on what I see before me, even if that student is failing. You don't know their capacity. We can never know. And a student can't rise to low expectations.
That's right.
And so...
Say that again for the people in the back.
Yeah, she dropped one right there.
A student can't rise to low expectations.
To low expectations. I need an organ.
Right.
I need a Hammond B3.
Right.
And a good drummer. Yes,
that's
sir.
A word. Yeah.
Right. And so I make sure that I try to open up opportunities for my students and put things before them that they may not have thought about before, right? And because sometimes we don't know it's possible until we see it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so that, I feel, is my job, not just to teach, but to make sure that they know that there are opportunities there before them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I had two teachers, Donna Poles and Chester Tylinski, shout out Mr. Tylinski, who did those things. Like, he put me in like classes I didn't want to be in, like journalism, and then made me run the journalism club. And like, I remember I had to interview Edward Zwick, who was the director for Glory. And so like he was putting me in rooms that I didn't think that I would be in. And I remember terrified going downtown to this fancy hotel, interviewing this old white man. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, I don't even know if I feel comfortable, you know. And it was wonderful and it was great. And I didn't realize how big of a deal Glory would be, right?
Wow.
It hadn't come out. That was before. And how important that story was. But then another thing he put me in, and I know I don't really share this, you all. It came up last week, and so I'll share it here. When a brother who lives on our block, like we've been in Bronzeville for over 20 years now, and he lives on the block as well, but he's like a international comedian. Shout out Brian Babylon. And he just come back to stateside, and he's like, I just heard something about you. We were just talking about you. And I'm like, you were talking about me? And he's like, yeah. He said, you're famous. I said, I'm not famous. And he was, and so I'll tell you why he said I was famous. Mr. Tylinski made me apply to this contest for Doritos brand tortilla chips for the Cheetos brand. And they had a new mascot, Chester Cheetah, right? You all remember Chester Cheetah? And it was a contest to figure out the new tagline, right? And so you had like to write a poem, you would be on MTV, you would get a college scholarship. Now, mind you, I had no intentions of going to college, but he had put me in what? Upward Bound at Loyola, preparing me. The only reason I went was not to go to college. It was to get away from the crib.
Yep.
I didn't want to be at home with my mom for the summer.
Same.
And so, yeah, I took those funky college classes. I did that stuff, but so that I could kick it, right, during the summer. But he was preparing me, right, unbeknownst to me, with these different opportunities. And he made me apply to this program. I write up this poem, send it off. Well, guess what? I won. So it was on, like, MTV. And the poem, they chose my tagline, which was, it ain't easy being cheesy. And so...
What?
Wow.
Yeah.
Look at Erick. Y'all see Erick? Our producer just looked around. I think y'all had the same reaction.
From.
That is crazy.
I don't share that. Most people don't know because I'm like, it's so cheesy. No pun intended. But
sometimes cheesy works.
Yeah. But I remember my freshman and sophomore year, my roommates were like, why do you get all this Cheeto stuff? Like I had notebooks, like pens, like they gave me money and they gave me like, of course, all their stuff to market. And so I just needed pens, right? Not thinking into this. I was like, well, because I wrote this stupid jingle, da, 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 da. And they're like, that was you? And so it was like this crazy thing that I didn't realize. Oh, this is a big deal. Kind of like, and of course, outside of the scholarship money, I didn't get any money. And they used that tagline for many years.
The residuals on that one.
It would have been crazy, right? But that's what I mean by trying to make sure that people have, that students have access in front of you. And still, with those two individuals, Donna Poles, what I didn't realize was that she was the advisor for the seniors, for the college advisor. She came to me sophomore year and said, I just happened to look over your transcript, and do you know if you keep at the same pace that you're at now in terms of how many classes you're taking a semester, that you can graduate next year?
Wow.
And I said, what? And she said, yeah, so I think you need to start thinking about college. And I was like, oh, I don't know anything about that. I don't think I want to do that. And so very similar to your teacher, she started helping me navigate that process and said, well, here are possibilities, but I need you to start doing research there and just keep doing what you're doing, and I'll help you on this end. Because I'm like, I can't afford it. I went home, and of course, my parents were actually, yours said, go ahead. Mine actually had a very different reaction, and it was, college? What you going to college for? You don't need to do that. You need a good government job. You need to work at the post office.
With some
or
benefits.
You need to get a trade like me or your father, you know, an electrician or a mechanic, so that you can take care of yourself. College is not a solid bet. And so I was very conflicted, you know, listening to my parents, or do I listen to folks who, of course, they were like, and these white folks, it's different for them. You know, they don't know how they might be able to pay for that. Who do you think is going to pay for this? And so that's what it boiled down to. In the family, we don't have the resources for those kind of higher ideas, you know? So I'm so grateful for those two teachers, because really, I didn't realize that he was trying to prep me just in case with the Upward Bound. Mm-hmm. And then she was preparing me, right? And had actually checked into my record to go, because I was a nerd. Now, I was a thug, like I told you all before, you know, meaning I was one of those rough kids. And so I'm glad that people saw me. I had an attitude. I had a mouth. I was always getting suspended. I was the kid who, before I'd gotten to college, I'd attended, I think, 8 or 9 schools, constantly, you know, moving from neighborhood to neighborhood. My parents divorced when I was 2, going back and forth, down south to Louisiana, back to the city, out to the suburbs, back to the city. So it was very chaotic and hard for me to connect. And you all know, when you are the new one on the block, especially in new neighborhoods, especially in the hood, somebody's going to test you. You know what they say? They want to test you when your gun goes warm, you know? And so, unfortunately, I fought a lot. And even when there was no need for me to fight anymore, that's what I knew.
That's what you knew, yeah.
And Mr. Tylinski, I'll never forget, he said to me once, and I've said this to students after, because I don't know if you all know, I taught high school for 7 years at an alternative high school in Chicago. Innovations, what's up? A wonderful school, arts integration school, and I taught English and drama there. And my teacher told me what I told them. You have a really powerful voice. I wonder what you'd be when you learn to use that power for good.
Wow.
And it hit me in the chest because I'd never thought about me being powerful, and that I had a choice in how I was using that power of voice, you know, of might. And I think that that's when I shifted to, there's a different way to fight battles.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And to this day, I'm still fighting battles, but in a different way.
And in a lot of ways, I feel that, and in a lot of ways, I'm still shifting. You know, I had a similar experience where I ultimately landed in college, didn't really have a linear path. I was getting away from church because I'm a pastor's kid, and PKs are under intense, extreme scrutiny to the point where your parents and their occupations become your occupation too. Before you really realize what it is that people are pushing you into. And so we did things that normal kids did. It just got around the church faster.
Right.
And so for me, it was either college or the Army. And I didn't want to go to the Army. So it was like, all right, I got to figure this college thing out. I think it took a few experiences to help find my voice in that, you know, larger level sense, to recognize the power that I had, to recognize the life lessons that came from my experiences growing up that I still use. Public speaking is one of those things. And, you know, in the Black church, you got to be skilled at extemporaneous speaking. When them Easter speeches come up, you had no choice.
You had no choice.
You know, and I know there's a lot of other churches that do that too, but we wasn't reading them. You know, you had to memorize them. You better say it with some feeling. You never know when you're going to get called up for prayer or a testimony. I played the drums, and so I was used to being looked at by everybody. And I was 8 years old when I played for my dad full time.
Oh, wow.
So I got through in the gauntlet. You know, I got through in there in front of adults. And you know how that is. You know, they want to shout for 2 hours and my arms are tired. So
I got homework.
Slowing down. Go on, baby, play.
You know what I mean? Baby. Yeah. So there was a lot that came out of that, but college was a way out. And then when I got into school, I realized how education was also a form of ministry and service. And I could be some of the people that helped me and to make that connection. You all have effectively become the people that have helped you.
Absolutely.
And so my question is, it's so interesting how this worked out. We have someone who's in the classroom, someone who does wraparound services. How do you help your students to raise their expectations? I want to go back to that quote, that word that you put out there before, Tina, about rising to low expectations. What are some of the things that you all do in your work to help students raise their expectations and find their voices in the same way that the people helped for you to find your voices?
I think for me, what's been most effective has been helping students realize that their struggle is very common. A lot of times they feel like they're the only one. They're the unicorn. They're the only one who's ever struggled with time management, the only one who flunked a test or flunked a paper or whatever. And I don't know what it is about English teachers, but English teachers have a way of stamping children. They have a way of making these indelible impressions on children. And it's probably because in English classes is where you're the most expressive. It's the most authentic expression of your academic self, if you will. Wow. And when that's critiqued in a harsh way,
it shrinks you. Yeah,
it shrinks you, but I believe it also freezes you. I have this weird theory that I haven't been able to find in any book or anything, but I believe when we're in our formative years, we have these experiences that freeze us. It freezes us in that moment, and we grow anatomically, we grow chronologically, but emotionally, we're still stuck at where that happened. And so
it frees you or freezes?
Freezes.
It can do both.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All
I believe it can do both.
Gotcha.
It depends on how you approach it.
Okay.
And a lot of how we cope with trauma comes from what we see growing up. Yeah. If avoidance is how mom and dad dealt with trauma, that's how I'm going to deal with it. If they confront it, sit down, have a courageous conversation, then that tends to be how we deal with it. So I think one of the things that to get back to your question, that I've been very good at is helping students see that, hey, I struggled too. I took the scenic route to a degree. Like I flunked out of a community college and then ended up working at the community college that I flunked out of and helping students just like me and you find their way. Yeah. It wasn't until I try to help students find their aha moments. They're those moments where they fall in love with whatever it is it is that they're seeking. I remember my aha moment in communication theory at Eastern Illinois University in a lecture hall with about 75 students. I'm sitting on the front row, teacher's on stage, and she's talking about standpoint theory. It's a theory that basically says individuals will view a circumstance or situation based upon where they stand in relation to it. So you're going to look at that bottle of water from your vantage point. You're going to see something different. I'm going to see something different. And based on our collective view of that particular situation or whatever, we're able to kind of shape the full picture of whatever that is.
Yeah, to make meaning from it. Yeah.
My hair stood up on its end. I was like, there are people that actually study this stuff? Like, this is like, I get chills talking about it now because it was that impactful for me that there was a field of study that made what I was thinking make sense.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And that was my aha moment. And so I try to help students chase those aha moments. What are you willing to do for the rest of your life that you love so much, you'd be willing to do it for free? You could prop me up sick and I would do what I'm doing right now because I love it that much. Yeah. And so helping students chase whatever it is that they're passionate about. And that's something that, some people have some different views on whether or not students should chase passion or should they chase a paycheck. I think you can get paid chasing your passion, but it's going to take some creativity and some ingenuity and some intentionality. But I think it's possible because when you are in a field or taking classes around something that you're passionate about, you love going to class. You don't mind doing the homework. Like you're doing something that connects with you, that resonates with you, that gets you up in the morning. Yeah. And to me, I'd rather a student embrace that and chase that than a paycheck. I used to have students when I worked at the University of Illinois, pre-med, but they sucked at chemistry. They want to be an engineer, but they suck at calculus. Like, this is not your ministry, fam. This is not the lane for you. And I've actually had students, parents tell them, I'm only paying for this particular kind of degree. I had a student who the mom was a superintendent, the dad was a principal, and they were only paying for an education degree. And This girl was struggling. I mean, D's and F's on every report card. And so she called, she said, Mr. Stevenson, I need you to talk to my parents. Her parents drove from Chicago down to Champaign to my office. We sat and we talked to almost 8:30 that night, trying to help them understand that this isn't what she's passionate about. This isn't what rings her bell. This isn't her thing. This is y'all thing. Y'all trying to live vicariously through this child, and it's breaking her. And so it wasn't, I mean, she was too far into the degree in order, to switch out. So on graduation day, she graduates barely with her education degree. She gives them the diploma cover, because they'll never really give you the degree. But she gave them the diploma cover, and then she came back and did another 2 years in recreation and tourism. This girl now runs her own tourism company, leading tours in all these far-flung places across the world, making 6 figures, doing her thing, because that's what she was really passionate about. Yeah. But sometimes we need somebody to be an advocate for us. We need someone that can articulate to those that don't understand the vision that we see, to help them understand, hey, this is how I'm built. This is how I'm crafted. This is how I'm made. Yeah.
Standpoint theory.
Yeah.
Excellent. What about you? What are some of the things that you're doing to help raise expectations?
I think that honesty is one of those things. And then 2, I come from the school of, remember, I'm a trio baby. So, came through trio in high school, also in student support services and college. And so that's why I taught Upward Bound. I tutored for Upward Bound. I was a RA for Upward Bound, and then a trio SSS advisor, then director, because I believe in paying it forward. Give back what you gave, right? Be who you needed. And so I think that intrusive advising model, and especially being not only a trio person, but also a former high school teacher, I'm in the face of my students. And I know that's not everybody's style, but I'm the teacher who is going to not only, if I haven't seen you for a couple weeks, shoot an email and go, hey, haven't seen you. What's going on? Right? If I still don't hear from them, especially if they started off strong, I'm calling. And they freak out. Hello, professor? And the parent's like, can we help you? No, you can't. But may I speak to, whatever the student's name is? Haven't seen you. What's going on? Yeah. Because I want them to know, one, I see you.
That's dope.
Right? It's not okay.
Because by telling you don't see them, is acknowledging that you see them. I noticed that you weren't there. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that honesty and kind of intrusive advising go hand in hand as a way for me to reach students and help them to reach their capacity. Being honest with my journey. I feel like a lot of students come in the classroom and they're already intimidated. You are Professor so-and-so, and then don't let me say something like, oh, I graduated at 16. They really are like, oh, you can't understand me. But then I say that, yeah, and I thought I was hot stuff. And I got to U of I in Champaign, and I learned very quickly that I was not hot stuff, and that there were so many other skills outside of just knowing how to quickly do homework. Remember, I was at a school, as great as the teachers were, the institution did not prepare us. We were not on a college track, and so I didn't know how to study. I got lucky that I was used to catching on really quickly because I had no choice, jumping from school to school, And so I didn't know time management. I didn't know all the things they don't know, right? And so I shared that with them, and that I was the kid who at the end of my first semester, because remember, I was on scholarship, I got a letter saying, hey, little mom, if you can't get yourself together, you got to go. And it terrified me. I was like, oh, my goodness. And one of the things that I was not doing at that point, I was not going to classes, the early ones. I was like, oh, my mom's not waking me up in the morning anymore. Why would I go to an 8 a.m. class? That's crazy, right? I wasn't going to classes. I wasn't working with other students to study together. I was trying to handle it all on my own. The TRIO program, it reached out to me. When I tell you, I never responded to her. I did not call her back. I didn't respond to the little note she put in my little mailbox. because I thought I was hot stuff. And college was about not needing anyone, right?
Right,
not needing adults.
I'm on my own
grown
now.
I'm on my own. I'm supposed to be able to do this on my own. So stop bugging me, would you? When I got that letter and my mother's response, it was some real act right. I called my mom and I said, I was crying and I blamed everything but me, right? I blamed racism because there was a lot of that on campus. I said, the professors, I'm like one of the only blacks in the classroom. Girl, that ain't got nothing to do with you not going to class and doing your work, right? I blamed the hostile environment on campus. Everything except for the things that I wasn't doing. And my mother's response to me, you all might think she cussed me out like, well, you need to get yourself together. She said, it's okay, baby. I told you should work at the post office anyway. Come on home. When I tell you that made me straighten up and fly right,
it's
I
motivation.
said, the devil is busy. I am not going back home.
Yeah.
And so I said, Tina, you need to figure it out. And so I started by calling that advisor. And she was extraordinary, and she actually said, there's tutoring on campus.
Free tutoring. Here are all the things that you're missing out on by not responding to my call. I'm trying to connect you with other people that you can study with. I'm trying to tell you that there's support for you here and that, like you said, you're not alone.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of folks are coming down here and are struggling and don't know what to do and don't have the resources and the skills, but you can acquire them. But you got to be intentional. The same word you used, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I am proud to say that I, too, graduated with honors, right? And that's the story I tell my students because they need to know, I got my first D. I thought I was hot stuff. Freshman year, first semester, I was doing all the things and that I had to realize that it was me. And so I do that, being honest, to show that I'm a real person, right? And that if I can do it, you can do it as well. But two, I'm honest about what's going on with you. I notice you say some things, like I've had students say things to me like, you're so great. Why are you teaching us? And my question becomes, what's going on with you that's your question? Where do you think I should be? And why don't you think you should be a part of that? And so those real moments, right, of kind of helping them to see why they're saying the things they're doing, why they're acting in the ways or not acting in the ways that they say they like. One of the first things I do at the beginning of the semester for all of my 101 students, they have to write a letter to themselves. I don't look at it. It's about what are your goals? What things do you think can stand in the way of your goals? What are your short-term goals, meaning this semester? What are your academic goals in terms of the next 4 years? And then 10, where do you want to see yourself? I make them write that. And then by week 12, 13, I hand it back. Have you been doing what you said you were going to do? Many of them have forgotten that they even wrote it the first day as my first writing assignment. But I'm about reflection and helping them to be self-reflective. And like, do you have like Carol Dweck's book, which is one of the articles we read the very first week? Do you have a fixed or a growth mindset? Many of us say, I never liked English. I'm horrible at English. My teachers in English were horrible. I can't do it. Like you just talked about, they are stuck at age 12 in that experience in English class. And so they have told themselves, I can't do it. And so what happens when you tell yourself you can't do it? You become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so let's lean into a growth mindset. And this is what that means. And this is how that looks in academia. And so when I hear them saying things that reflect a fixed mind state, I go, what are we leaning into right now? Oh, that is kind of fixed, right? Oh, okay. I'll try. And so those are some of the, the strategies that I use, just trying to help them to see themselves better and to think. Again, I'm all about critical thought, thinking about your actions, right? And is that whatever you're thinking or doing, is that getting you to what you said your goals were? Because I'm not choosing your goals. You are. Right. And so you have to be self-reflective so that you can put yourself back on track, because there's not always going to be somebody here who is helping you get back on track. You have to have your own internal meter as well.
Absolutely. That reminds me of some of my student stories and even some of my professional stories as well, just to touch on a couple of things. Those wake up moments, those aha moments, I've had them. I remember when I finally got to college, because I didn't go right away, and I ended up at Columbia College, and my parents couldn't afford housing. So I stayed in a youth hostel for a year, right there on Congress in Wabash. And I stayed in that hostel, and I remember sharing a room, not that much different from the size of this room, with people I didn't know. You know, just a bunch of beds, communal fridge. They used to steal my food. You know, it was a rough go at it. And my first night, I had to do a bridge program because my grades weren't good enough to get in regularly. So I had to do the bridge program. And my first night, we had to read the first chapter of the Antoine Fisher story. Wow. And I remember getting ready to go to sleep and not reading the book, and something clicked. And I just remember saying to myself, well, why the hell are you here?
That part.
You stand in this room with all these people just to be here?
Right.
You might as well read. What else you got to do?
Right.
This is me talking to myself. What else you got to do tonight?
Yeah.
Where else you going to go? You can't afford to go nowhere else.
Right.
You might as well read this book and be ready for class.
Right.
And something shifted in me that day to say, okay, if I'm going to be here, I'm going to be here. And I'm going to make the best of it. That's how I started getting involved on campus, because I didn't want to be in a hostel.
Right.
And eventually transferred to UW Whitewater, started my career, went through my master's program, and got to my doctorate, and had the same epiphany on the first assignment of my doc program.
Wow.
And I remember sitting in the basement the day before it was due, trying to do the first assignment the day before it was due. And I just stopped and I said, why are you here?
Push.
You done made it this far.
Exactly.
And you gonna do this at the last minute like this is undergrad all over again?
Right.
I know that's cute, you know, when you're a freshman, sophomore.
Right.
You know, that paper was due at 12 and I got it done at 11:58 and then I went out. Like, that's cute. Not here, though.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to do this here, then there's no reason. You've invested too much time, too much money. People are depending on you.
That part.
You have a family that's watching you now. And so there are those different moments that happen throughout, even after you feel like you've made it. Even after you feel like you've gotten to a certain point, and it's like, okay, wait a minute. Why are you here?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so some of those student stories that have impacted you and that you've helped to impact others reminded me as well. I will also say that from the standpoint of being someone who can try to be who we needed, it makes me think about the boxes and barriers photo. You know, that equity, equality, you know, photo that we talk about. And I ask people to pay a little bit less attention to the people and more attention to the boxes and the fence. Because the boxes represent the resources that people need to get over the fence, but the fence represents the barrier in the first place. And so it's like when I'm doing policy work and procedure work, I'm asking myself, am I providing boxes with this or am I removing fences?
Yeah.
Am I providing resources for people who need it, or am I doing the work to remove the fence?
Absolutely.
I'm a homeowner. I've had to do work on fences before. It ain't easy. And so when we relate that to the work that we do, I have to look at it from a system standpoint. Academic affairs, student affairs, institutional, right? I'm in an employee-facing role now. And I've said this before, so I'm not scared to say it on the airwaves, but I outgrew student-facing roles. Once I became the person that I needed, I realized that I served a purpose.
Right.
And I didn't know if I was fulfilling that purpose any longer.
Yeah.
I was gravitating more towards employee-facing roles because I realized that we needed help too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that we didn't always know how to deal with tough situations and have conversations. And some of us were working through imposter syndrome in our own careers. And some of the same things that we went through as undergrads were those habits and those mindsets, fixed versus growth mindset, those things show up in your job as well.
That's true.
And you find yourself in positions 5 and 10 years into your career, and you have to have some of those same moments. And so I said, what can I do to help in my everyday role to lean into the needs and concerns of our workforce as well? Because we expect for people to come to work in a mission-based organization and just do the work because it's based on the mission. So we're here for the students. So it's okay if I pay you 30% under market value.
No,
we're here for the students, right? The students are a priority. So it's okay if you're not in a job, if you're in a job that doesn't make you feel fulfilled, or your supervisor doesn't look into you, or you don't have other people that you can find connection. We're here for the students. So you should be okay with coming in on your day off or not having as much time on paternity or maternity leave, because the students are a priority. And I think there's something about that has caused a rift in this industry.
Absolutely.
That is causing people to look elsewhere or have careers that aren't as fulfilling, or we don't show up. Yeah, burn out.
You know, we burn out.
And we can't be the best to our students.
And the morale is low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thank you for saying that. We just had that conversation. I reached out in a book group through ADRC. We're reading Tiffany, I think her name is Tiffany Yu's The Anti-Ableist Manifesto.
Yep.
And one of the things Danielle Dickerson was talking about yesterday, I reached out to her because in D2L, for the student-facing, they can listen to all of the content, right? They can read it, but for those who are more auditory, they can listen. But we as faculty who have to read all of the papers, there's no auditory function for us to listen.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I said, we need that too.
Yeah.
And she said, oh my goodness, I didn't even think about it. And D2L doesn't offer that. And so she and Carlos and Media IMS were trying to find workarounds for me to download something. But what we all realized is, and it speaks to your point, we do so much student-facing things. This will support the students. It'll support the students that we often forget the employees who are there to support the students.
Yeah.
And if we are not too supported in our work, then how can we be most effective in supporting them?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And like you said, it comes across in the morale. It comes across in how we show up to work. And then it also comes across in the ways in which we feel passionate about helping students and passionate about the work that we do. And so that's why I feel like it's important to lift up the workforce. That's why I enjoy working in human resources. I didn't know what it was going to be like. I didn't know if I would enjoy it at all. But it's caused me to think very critically about some next steps in my career. Yeah. Because I realized that I feel like I've been doing HR work my whole life just with students. Student life and nothing but HR for the students.
Yeah.
Right.
That's it.
We got some of the same areas.
Right.
Conduct, employee relations, benefits, right? Like
all of the same.
The program that you're in offers benefits. TRIO was a benefits-based program, right? Clubs and organizations can be related to affinity groups, employee resource groups, and things of that nature. There's so many parallels.
Yeah.
Coming on this side from the employee standpoint was like, wow, this is the kind of work I feel like I've been doing for a long time. Now the mission is, how do I help those that have to show up every day? How do I help those who have to come to work despite what's happening at home, who don't get a chance to stay, who don't get a remote day, or who don't find equity in their roles, or are struggling with how to communicate and manage up? These are all things that impact how you're able to show up for the students. And I think it's been a really interesting experience.
I always say, my mom, she has these one-off statements, man, that just rattle your whole world. She always says, experience without reflection is a wasted experience.
Ooh,
and I just said that to a student last week. If you're going to have an experience that you're not going to reflect on, what's the point of going through the experience? And so all of the work that we do with students, that we do with employees, they're experiences that warrant and deeply need some real critical reflection. And so I appreciate this session. I feel better. I don't know about y'all, but I feel better.
I said thank you for that. I'll
Please
take
do.
that and put it in my pocket so I can share it not only with myself when I need it, but for my students as well. That's great.
We might need to do an episode just on that.
Oh,
Things my mama says.
Right.
Yeah. I have taken so much from this conversation, and this is exactly what I was hoping for, right? That we could just sit down, flow, talk about whatever comes up. But what's inspired me from this is hearing your stories about how you landed where you are and some of the few touch points on your journey. What are some final words that you can offer listeners, whether they be students, employees, people that are outside? We shout out to all of the new listeners and subscribers who do not work at Oakton, that are finding value in these conversations. What can you leave with them during this time of year to help with resiliency in some of these uncertain times?
Well, in terms of, I'm going to shift from these times. Now you just added another monkey wrench. But what I'll say is to never let anyone tell you who you are capable of being, and never let anyone limit your capacity, even if that person is you, because often it is.
Yeah. Excellent.
I think I would share, remember your why. What brings you to the office in the morning? What motivates the work that you're going to do that day? When I first got here, Rick reached out, Dr. Brooks reached out because we're frat brothers. But I remember conversations that we had early in my Oakton journey that sparked me to begin my day. When I get to my office and I sit at my desk, why are you here? Yeah. What's the point? What are you here for? Yep. If it's student affairs, if it's student facing, if it's student service, then let's make that happen today. Write down what you want to get done that day. Maybe you'll get half of that list done. Maybe you'll get all of it done, but write it out and remember why you're doing the work. And that is what I believe continues to drive you forward, is to remember your why.
You just took me back to 2005. Wow. Because when I got to Whitewater, after having gone through all of that, I put a handwritten sign above my desk that said, "Remember why you're here." Yeah, I might need to do that again.
Yeah. You had me write down, do the hard thing.
Do the hard thing. Yeah, I remember that.
Do the hard thing.
Yeah, that's what you got to attack. Yeah.
And in terms of the state that we are in as a nation, I think my response would be, one, don't go where love isn't being served. So use your power, right? Because some spaces we want to be in, and so we should, right? But other places, even if that's about not going to certain stores or not giving them your money, like, don't go where love isn't being served. When people show you who they are, what to say, right? Yeah. Right? Believe them. And two, remember your power, the power of your voice and the power of our actions. It's go time. And so we need to make sure that we are intentional about reacting to this moment and making sure that we are not acting scared. You know, yes, there are consequences, but there are bigger consequences if we do nothing. Act in this moment. Yeah. The time is now.
Time is now. And thank you for your time with us on another episode of Critical Conversations. Thank you, Terrance. Thank you, Tina. Thank you to all of our listeners. I hope you got as much from this conversation as I did. No agenda. That's right. Another episode of No Agenda, and we made it through. So thank you all. We appreciate it. And this is not the last time we'll have you on this show. Take care, everybody.
Bravo.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
The Critical Conversations podcast is recorded at Oakton College, located at 1600 East Gulf Road, Des Plaines, Illinois. The show is sponsored in part by the Oakton College Educational Foundation, produced by Erick, Rohn, coordinated by Brenda, Cruz, and hosted by Dr. Rick Daniels. For more information or to connect with us, email critsconpod@gmail.com. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time for more Critical Conversations.